I'm not telling my story to be pitied. After all, everything that happened is my life, and I certainly don't need pity. I am a one-woman man in my life. I've always taken marriage very seriously, maybe even too seriously. I never walked away from my wife because I never saw anyone around except my only wife. And there was no need for it, no desire for it either. Although I must admit that many women tried, but she gave me, and now about everything in order. I met my future wife in the early 90s, among the guests at a wedding of a friend of mine, and fell in love with her immediately. We dated her for 6 months and then decided to get married. We had a modest wedding and were over the moon. Our marriage was her second. She had developed a relationship with her ex-husband a year before we met. Something didn't work out there. I did not go to her with questions because I thought that there was no reason to stir up her soul, and she almost never said anything. By the way, my wife is a beautiful, smart woman and a great hostess. I was really lucky. When we got married, the whole country was in shambles. There were no normal, stable jobs. She was a medic and worked in a military unit, and I, apart from my main job, managed to work in 2 other places. It seemed to come out not bad. I wanted very much that the family had no need. From the first day I met my wife, I was very touchy about her. He loved her, but madly. In the truest sense of the word, he carried her in his arms. I considered her the closest and dearest person to me. 2 years of our life together had passed, but it didn't work out with children. It hurt her very much. She was very upset. She prophesied to me that I would leave her because of her own infertility. She was diagnosed with fallopian tubes. It was a terrible blow to her. But I did not despair. I was there for her, supported her, calmed her down. I told her she was my destiny and that I loved her more than life. I reassured her that I could do everything necessary to make her successful as a mother. After all, medicine can do a lot these days. She believed me, smiled at me, and for the sake of her smile, I was ready to give myself. Just to make her happy. At the time, I was working very hard. I had a goal. I worked hard to reach it. I constantly needed money for various examinations by different doctors, consultations at institutes to buy medicines. We went and had several surgeries in different clinics, all sorts of witch doctors there and everything. Each time I believed that this time everything would happen and my wife would finally get pregnant, and then we would have a real life. But in spite of our efforts, nothing worked. Took almost 5 years. My wife lost all hope and put up with it. But me, I have always been an optimist and never gave up. I continued to believe in a miracle. My energy gave my wife strength. She always told me that it was easy for her to be with me. I could look forward to tomorrow with confidence and courage. I believed her, because I thought she was the person I was born to be with, and I must live my life for her. She is my strong backbone and my unbreakable bastion. If she is there, then I will overcome everything and be able to do anything. One day my wife and I read an article about the Human Reproduction Institute and the possibility of artificial insemination. This idea gave us new hope, new impetus and strength to strive for our cherished goal. I was ready to turn the earth upside down, and was more confident than ever that this time everything would work out for sure. The surgery itself and the rehabilitation period was, by my standards at the time, well, very expensive. So I began to look for a way to earn the required amount. The city we have a small and special choice was not, but I once came across an ad in one of the magazines and it sounded as follows. Reserve soldiers, we invite you to serve under contract, decent wages and so on. In general, they were recruiting tools to do certain kinds of work in certain places and paid very good money for the work. I did my compulsory military service in the Marines and God bless me. Of course, I was not particularly raving about patriotic ideas, so I wasn't burning with a desire to lay down my life for somebody's political interests either. I just needed tools and resources to achieve our goal. In general, I thought about it and decided to take a risk. My wife cried and did not want to let me go. She was afraid and said that if something happened to me, she would not need the money later. And I was explaining that, unfortunately, we were not born into millionaire families, and no one will ever give us anything for nothing in this life, unless you come and take it yourself. I calmed her down, told her that everything would be all right, because we need this money not for trinkets, but for a good cause. In general, I traveled to faraway places, wasn't home for a long time, but came back with what was needed. I was lucky, and I did not lay my head down, nor did I take sins on my soul. And then my wife and I went to the institute, had an operation, and no miracle had happened, which we were so alone. My wife got pregnant, I rejoiced. Soon our daughter was born, we were happy, just madly. I was literally flying on wings, working and doing almost everything around the house, helping not with the baby because it was my pleasure, and I did not notice any worries at all. My wife said that I was an eternal engine, and I really wanted to surround her and my daughter with every kind of care. And soon I got a good and decent stable job and started earning good money. I bought a car for my wife, we moved to a bigger apartment, and every year we traveled to the seas and oceans. We spent all our free time together, tried to make up our leisure time, trips to the countryside, to the movies, skiing, skating rink, etc. so my girls wouldn't get bored. Thinking back to those days, it seemed to me here was a candy truck rolling over on our street, and we deserved it. That's how 14 years of our life together passed, and how happy I thought it would be. My daughter was slowly growing up. Family always came first for me. Everything was just for my loved ones. I never felt that my life is ordinary, that it is monotonous. Scandal in the family has never been. I respect for my wife avoided even a reason for her discontent, and if something she did not like, the little things, went first to a compromise. I always tried to pay attention to her as a woman. I do not remember a day when I did not tell her how much I loved her, and how much I valued her. When we were poor, I always found an opportunity to make her pleasant surprises, with or without cause. Flowers, small gifts, and various girlish trinkets. She always liked it so much. In bed with my spouse, everything was fine too. I am not conservative, and it seemed to me that we are absolutely open, that we trust each other. I tried to be sensitive to all my wife's interest, and in my opinion, everything was very harmonious. And she herself always said that she was happy with everything, and that I fully satisfy her needs. And now a word about jealousy. I can say that I have never been jealous of her. She never gave me any reason to be, even though she worked as a medic in an almost male-dominated team, a military unit. In my work, I periodically went on long business trips for a week and a half or even 2 weeks. I always looked forward to returning home to my beloved. She too always met me with joy and awe. And then everything was like in the movies or anecdotes. One day I was flying on business on another expedition, and in the city where I had to change flights, I received a message from my colleagues that my work was cancelled, and I had to return home. I flew back to my city in the afternoon, bought a small bouquet of roses and champagne, and decided to surprise my wife without telling her. By my count, she was still at work and my daughter at school. I took a cab home, started to open the door with the key, but the door was locked from the inside. Thought, well, there's no surprise. Started ringing the doorbell, zero emotion. Knocked and rang, began to worry, not understanding what was happening. I even wanted to call the police, but finally my wife's voice asked me from the door, "Who's there?" I said, "Honey, why are you scaring me? It's me, I canceled a business trip." Even then I thought she was asleep or maybe sick. And then she opened the door, and I did not recognize her, and it was a completely different person. Her eyes were alien, she looked as if I was not there, as if through me. I went into the hallway, and through the open door into the hall, I saw some military officer sitting in an armchair. Only then did I notice that my wife was wearing a naked robe, and suddenly I realized everything. She told me in a calm tone, "You're bleeding." I saw that the stinging bouquet was growing with such force that I literally squeezed it through my fingers. For the first time in my life, my legs trembled so much so that I just sat down at the door on the floor. It's hard for me to describe in words how I felt at that moment. I couldn't breathe, I was suffocating. There was a tornado of thought in my head and everything. It was like a dream. I couldn't believe my eyes, it didn't seem like it was happening to me. Because it just couldn't happen to me at all. My wife is not capable of that. Then she said, "We need to talk. I hope you're not going to make a scandal, he's not guilty of anything." But me, I couldn't even stand up at that minute, let alone scandalize. If I'd had a fit of rage, I probably would have done something irreparable. But now I realize, thank God, that I didn't. I didn't see him disappear from the apartment unnoticed. My wife and I stayed behind. She sat down on her knees in front of me and said, "This happens in life." And she cried. I'd remember bits and pieces of what she told me. I can't live like this anymore. I'm confused. I want to repent to you. You are good. I am bad. You are unworthy. Then she began to tell me how many times in her whole life she had cheated on me. I had thoughts that she wanted to destroy me. She went on. She told me that the very first time was with her ex-husband, in the beginning of our relationship when she and I first started dating. She said she met her ex intentionally and gave herself to him to prove to him what kind of woman he had lost. Then she cheated on me with some military medic in another city when I did a refresher course. She gave herself to him out of pity. He was very romantic and was suffering. Suffering because he had recently divorced his wife. Read the elements to her. Then there was another military doctor, but already in our town. Then another and finally came to the last one with whom I actually caught them our house. She told me that they had been having an affair for almost a month, and that she had wanted to break up with him. But she hadn't had time. She said they always met at work and that she was nasty because she desecrated our house and so on. When I listened to her, I asked, "Why did you do this to me?" She sobbed straight into a screen and said she couldn't explain to me the reasons for her actions. It is an inexplicable passion and there is no excuse for it, and it is up to me to make the decision. At the same time, she swore that if I could find the strength to forgive her, she would be faithful to me to the grave. For the first few days I couldn't sleep or eat at all. Like a robot, I went to work, came home, just lay there and stared at the ceiling. At night I was drenched in cold sweat, drinking water and smoking non-stop. I did not touch alcohol, by the way. My colleagues asked me what happened. They said I was all black. My wife saw what was happening to me and constantly cried and begged for forgiveness. I didn't know what to say to her, so I kept quiet. I didn't know where to go or where to sail. My head wasn't working at all. Later, I was going to talk to her many times, to share my soul with her as I always had before, to tell her how much I loved her. But I couldn't find the right words. There was a lump in my throat that I couldn't help but spit out and swallow. 6 months went by like that. During that time, I kept thinking and remembering our life, dating inside myself, looking for answers. Maybe it was me. I was doing something wrong. I chewed myself out of the whole guilt complex at the time. During that time, I had given up on my wife both emotionally and physically. The thought of sexual intimacy with her never even occurred to me. I became afraid of having sex with her. I don't know how to explain it. It seemed to me that I was not able to satisfy her. That's why there was no reason to go to bed. It would only embarrass me. We communicated with her on domestic topics. To my daughter, I allocated attention without prejudice as before. Most of all, I wanted my daughter not to suspect anything. At that time, she was at the beginning of her teenage years and I didn't want to hurt her because she had nothing to do with the circumstances. Then later, the emotions went away and the pain in my soul somewhat subsided. One day, I decided to talk to my wife and told her that I did not hold a grudge against her, that I loved her just as much. I told her that what happened probably changed something in me, but so far I can't figure out what it is. I guess it takes time. I asked my wife to promise me that if life with me didn't turn out the way she wanted it to, that she would tell me right away. I won't hold back. There was no time to waste. Life is one and things can still work out differently, and with another person, we became close again, but not the way we were. I tried to be the same as before, but in bed with his wife began incomprehensible problems with potency. It made me gnaw on myself even more. So another 6 years went by and the family was always in the first place for me. And the question of whether it was cheating on me or not, I stopped wondering. She was just as beautiful, smart, a great hostess, and a good mom. Yes, I forgave her, but something didn't break you. Everything in the soul came out. Empty. This poison poisoned me to the bone. My unbreakable bastion collapsed like a house of cards. And somehow the feeling of new did not. In time I became a different person. The true meaning of the word treason is that everything has changed. I had changed. I remembered with a smile the days when I wandered far and wide, earning money to give birth to my daughter. Back then I had the phrase written on my backpack unloading. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger. After a while, I suddenly stopped feeling the inner weight that had been weighing me down for so long. It's all strange. Really strange. I tried to comprehend and understand what had kept me from changing my life before. I don't know. I had always been an optimist and believed in the best. I hoped that things would settle down and be okay. And it did settle down, but at the same time, something very important left my soul. The very thing that gave meaning to the existence of our marriage. The very thing that motivated me to keep going. My stupid responsibility dictated that I couldn't drop everything and just walk out because that would be a betrayal. But it was not a betrayal. Just like that, suddenly and all of a sudden my attitude toward everything that had happened was different. I suddenly felt that my inner changes in my head had come to an end. It was as if I had woken up from oblivion. I realized that for a long time, I had not been living my life at all. A complete stranger to me. My wife, who was sleeping beside me, I looked at her sleeping at her face. I realized I didn't know this woman anymore. I left home that morning, turned off my phone, drove around town, stood on the roadsides in the woods. It's hard to explain, but somehow I felt at ease. I felt like a bird out of its cage. It felt like I had paid for all my mistakes in full. I thought and remembered and became more and more aware of my freedom. In the evening, I returned home, where I informed my wife of everything. There was a long talk, but no recriminations. She cried and said she had been waiting for this day all the time. Strangely enough, I no longer felt pity for her. I correctly explained to her my understanding of life at that moment, and she told me hers. She asked for forgiveness over and over again, and I told her that I had forgiven her long ago, but that I was no longer the man she had married. We lived almost 23 years. All 15 years until the breaking point, I lived only for her and my daughter. In the next 8 years, I don't even remember. In all that time, I never once reproached her for anything. I lived through everything, but during that time a lot has changed, especially my understanding and attitude towards everything. I realized that further marriage with her was a waste of time. My daughter grew up and almost jumped out of the family nest. The wife came to terms with it. I think she realized that our paths had parted long ago, and we just went side by inertia. But to be objective, there were good things in our life. While I was in the dark, nothing existed for me. I was happy. We finalized the divorce. I explained everything to my daughter. She is old enough now and understood everything. We continue to see her much more often than we see our wife. Life goes on, and the emptiness that echoed in my soul for so long, it no longer rings. There is no permanent woman. I'm afraid, and I don't want one. Now I know for sure that what doesn't kill us all at once, it makes us invalids. Dear friends, our next audio story has come to an end. Frankly speaking, I like this story, and in 2 words I will tell you why. First, I was expecting at most 1 or 2 betrayals from my wife, but as I read this list, it made me, how can I tell you, feel the greatest pity for her. And even for a second, I felt like I was in the main character's shoes. God forbid, I even remember having that same emotion come over me during the recording. I hope nothing was audible, but that's for you to judge. The story of the main character's life itself. In the process of reading the text, it made me deeply disgusted. After all, is it normal? You fell in love with a woman and did not even ask about her past, especially since she was married. Naively believing, risking your life for the sake of happiness, the questionable happiness of your couple. Overall, the way he behaved cannot be called worthy of a man, I believe. Plus, there is one inconsistency. Look, he risked his life in hot spots, and when he sought his lover in his, I emphasize, in his house, the poor guy was dumbfounded and crouched on the carpet, that he didn't even see the lover leave the apartment. And in general, what do you think? Is it okay to then live 8 years together and feel like nothing because of day to day? Of course, what pleased me, if you can say so at all, was the ending. He somehow found the strength to leave his wife. But does that count as courage? That's a ridiculous question. What do you think of his behavior? Do you think you could have noticed before that his wife was like a March cat on every corner making horns? You could take it and drink it. And by tradition, if you liked the video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to comment. I always answer you in the comments. And also listen to your suggestions, and in general, your activity makes me not to stop and record stories every day. We'll see you soon, friends.